Welcome.
Thank you very much. Shalom. Good morning to all of you. Nelson, thank you very much for inviting me to share some ideas and concerns with all of you this beautiful Sunday morning. I've given as a title for my remarks, Dreaming Toward Reconciliation. And the subject of dreams and dream interpretation has interested me for many years. In recent decades, it's the psychologists far more than pastors or theologians who've engaged this subject. And I would say that's much to the detriment of our theologies and spiritualities. My own graduate studies, as you just heard at Harvard Divinity School, which were in the mid-70s, focused on the interdisciplinary field of psychology and theology, along with Jewish-Christian relations. And among the courses I took were two called Myth and Dreams and God and Psyche. Both were taught by Professor Leighton McCutcheon. And one of the assignments for those courses was to keep a dream journal, recording nighttime dreams when I woke up in the morning. And this is a spiritual discipline that I began in 1974 and continue until this very morning. Over the years, these nighttime messages have nourished and deepened my own spirituality considerably. And it's this personal experience which has in turn stimulated my scholarship and teaching in the area of dream symbolism and interpretation. And in my research, I've tried to integrate insights from both theology and psychology. Since I'm also active in promoting mutual understanding among Jews, Christians, and Muslims, the interreligious dimension of this research has also held profound meaning for me. In an essay on dream psychology, my former teacher, Leighton McCutcheon, wrote, "An understanding of the function of dreams has unquestionably given fresh insight into the nature of psychopathology and psychotherapy. Can we suggest a concomitant insight on the side of health? The power tapped by dreams is that which is allied with the energy moving creativity, art, and higher forms of human expression. The dream is sometimes the direct source for literature and poetry. Think of Blake and Coleridge, or painting, Hieronymus Bosch, to say nothing of the visions of philosophy, Descartes, and religion in the Bible, Jacob or Israel." That's the end of the quote. And Jungian psychologist James Hillman, of blessed memory, in his book In Search, offers advice on how we can befriend our dreams, that's his term, in order to deepen our understanding of, quote, the myths which are operating in each of us, our real stories, the stories of our lives from within, rather than our case histories derived from without, end of quote. What Hillman calls the rediscovery of soul through the unconscious entails a spiritual dimension, quote, the reawakened presence of inner myth and sense of destiny, the sense that one is somehow meant. And to be meant implies a transcendent power that calls, chooses, a power which gives meaning. End of quote. Now, psychologists like McCutcheon and Hillman use modern language to restate truths that were known to our ancestors centuries ago. The Hebrew Bible, in stories such as those featuring Jacob, Joseph, and Daniel, conveys the same wisdom. The dreams are vessels for communication from the divine, also known as prophetic revelation. Such messages help us discover or confirm what our life purpose is, where we're meant to go, and how we're called to live. Very rarely do we experience in our dreams the kind of unambiguous message from God that, say, Jacob experienced when he had his famous dream of the angels ascending and descending the ladder, reaching unto heaven. No, most of us are not graced by such an awesome dream. Our own dreams are more ordinary, more ambiguous, mixing together information or events from our daily lives and scenes, characters, and messages that are outside the realm of our waking reality. And we tend to call the latter fantasies, akin to the creations of our willful imaginations, but percolating up from our unconscious. I want to suggest, based on teachings in the Jewish and Muslim traditions, with echoes in Christianity, that the unrealistic or often surrealistic content of our nighttime dreams is like a stream of flowing water containing gold nuggets, in this case, nuggets of transcendent meaning. And that, like the California gold prospectors, we're invited to pan for these nuggets of sacred meaning by recording our dreams when we wake up, then dialoguing with them over time in order to extract the higher wisdom that's being sent to us from a source beyond our egos or our intellects. And in my experience, it's after a while that you can start discerning patterns in dreams that only maybe one or two dreams won't reveal. Both the Talmud and the Hadith, the oral traditions of Judaism and Islam, respectively, teach us that our dreams can contain a fraction of prophecy. Nevuah in Hebrew, or Nabuah in Arabic, prophecy. The Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, says, a dream that is not interpreted is like a letter that is not read. That's from Rabbi Chisda. And Rabbi Hanania Bar Yitzchak, in the same section of the Talmud, says, dreams are 1/60th part prophecy. And from Kitab al-Tabir, the book of dream interpretations in the Hadith collection of al-Bukhari, quotes the Prophet Muhammad saying, a good dream of a faithful believer is a part of the 46 parts of prophethood. So in the Talmud, it's 1/60th. In the Hadith, it's 1/46th part. And we find also in the Hadith, the same source, this account. Ibn Umar narrated, men from the companions of Allah's Messenger used to see dreams during the lifetime of Allah's Messenger, and they used to narrate those dreams to Allah's Messenger, that being the Prophet Muhammad, and Allah's Messenger would interpret them as Allah wished him to interpret them. In the biblical episodes featuring Joseph and Pharaoh, and later Daniel and then Nebuchadnezzar, the proportion of prophecy in their dreams approached 100%. But the messages were conveyed in cryptic symbolism that required the special gifts of those dream interpreters, Joseph and Daniel, in order to decipher the symbolism. And in Joseph's case, it was that God-given capacity that caused his brothers to hate him. When they saw him coming and conspired to kill him, they said, here comes that dreamer. Later, that same capacity of dream interpretation brought about a positive turn in his fortune when Pharaoh had his dreams satisfactorily deciphered, and he lifted Joseph out of the dungeon, installing him as, we might say, Minister of Agriculture and Nutrition, putting him in a position to save the nation of Egypt, as well as his own family back in Canaan from famine. So Judaism and Islam both teach that in the absence of direct revelation received and proclaimed by a divinely sanctioned prophet, our dreams can serve as channels, however partial and obscure, for communications from God. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad taught that after his death, dreams would be the primary source of subsequent revelation, wahi in Arabic, supplementing the sacred teachings in the Quran. In the Bible, dreams are presented as a prophetic medium, whether dreamt by prophets and pharaohs and kings, or by people of less exalted status. So what can we make of this shared tradition about prophetic dreaming, and what import can it have for us today? On the personal level, dreams can be a powerful source of higher wisdom, guiding our uncertain steps, and on occasion, even bringing about a radical transformation in our lives. That has been true for me at several stages of my own development. On the transpersonal or the societal level, how can our dreams help us? We live in an era of genocide, weapons of mass destruction, and ecological threats caused mainly by human folly. And in America, we are experiencing chronic political polarization, with opposing sides viewing each other as irredeemably misguided and undermining our common future. The recent national election showed us how divided we are as a country, with deep gulfs separating racial groups, religious communities, economic strata, and political parties. In the imaginations of many people, apocalyptic fantasies are rampant, partly as a response to the insecurities of our present condition, and I would say the COVID pandemic certainly contributes to that. And all of these insecurities testify to our collective impoverishment of spirit and to the absence of alternative, nonviolent scenarios of messianic transformation. The prospect of an instant upheaval overturning this corrupt or fallen world is very tempting. And for groups or whole people suffering injustice, haunting memories, and harboring victim scripts, generate ideologies of militant revenge. Against this violent corruption of our imaginations and the pathological symptoms that we see reported in the mass media are traditions of healing and hope in all our Abrahamic traditions. I would argue that the teachings on dreams and prophecy that we find in Islamic, Jewish, and parallel Christian sources are resources we can tap to redeem our precarious situation as vulnerable creatures on this planet. But in order to become allies in this redemptive effort, we need to overcome the parochialism that has constrained us for centuries. We can no longer afford visions of triumph at another group's expense. Such fantasies are expressions of our own insecure egos and our childish needs to win some kind of dualistic religious or ideological war, as if winning is possible. Such negative energies only feed the darker and destructive forces within us. They ultimately tempt us into playing God, but without justice or mercy. Instead, they cause us to abuse our freedom in the service of domination and death. The end of times dreams of global transformation through violence need to be countered by truly messianic dreams of transformation through justice, compassion, and reconciliation. We need deeply life-affirming and life-enhancing dreams, ones that we can together implement and fulfill. For religious Jews like myself, the reestablishment of sovereign Israel in the wake of the European Holocaust was nothing short of miraculous. On the Sabbath, the holiest day of the week and the harbinger of the final redemption in our tradition, we fervently sing Psalm 126 as the prelude to the grace after meals. This psalm celebrates the return of the exiled Jews from ancient Babylon. When the Eternal brought about the return to Zion, we were like dreamers, the psalmist sings. It's that ancient dream, first fulfilled in the 6th century BCE when Cyrus, Koresh invited the exiles to return to Jerusalem, then carried forward by the messianic dreams and prayers of Jews throughout the generations that generated the modern ingathering of Jews to Israel, including myself. The challenge is to expand that dream to include the Palestinians and all other peoples suffering exile, indignity, and despair. We need all of us to publicly share our dreams of redemption and see how they can nourish us and reinforce each other instead of competing in a zero-sum struggle for victory or divine vindication. The culmination of those dreams is called in Jewish and Christian terms the Messianic redemption, and in Islamic terms the arrival of the Mahdi, followed by the day of judgment and resurrection. Meanwhile, we are slaughtering an awful lot of people, too often in the name of some religious ideology, while some of us are focused either on resurrection or paradise in some other realm of reality. The perverse contradictions in these militant religious worldviews are too tragic for words. They guarantee that one group's dream of triumph will end up being a nightmare of colossal proportions for everyone else. Our dreams can help heal us, but we need to humbly share them with our Abrahamic siblings, whatever their political leanings. These neighbors can be interpretive mirrors and correctives for us. For each person and for each faith community or political party, subjectivity limits the field of vision. That field is broadened and enriched when we come together, as Muhammad and his companions did over their morning tea, to share dreams and possible interpretations of their symbolism. If each of us at best can aspire to 1/46th or 1/60th part prophecy, would not the odds of reaching a critical mass of higher wisdom increase if we were to pool the visionary resources from our dreams? Jews, Christians, Muslims, and others can come together as allied dreamers and as partners in historical transformation. In fact, we must, lest the extremists in our faith communities hijack our sacred texts, our dreams, and ultimately our destinies in the service of global catastrophe. We are all drawn toward the divine light as plants are drawn to the sun's rays. Our dreams can be informed and our lives transformed by that light, even at night when the moon and the stars illumine the sky. And as we sleep, we are more receptive than on our waking hours to illumination and inspiration from the divine. So I wish us all not just pleasant or sweet dreams, but also dreams that can teach us how to be agents of God's love, justice, and reconciliation in a world that desperately needs us as active peacemakers. Thanks so much, and shalom, salam. Peace to all of us. So, what shall we do now? Have a conversation, I hope. I'm open to any responses. Please tell me your name.
This is Kelly. Thank you so much for that. I had a couple of thoughts pop in to my head as you were speaking. One is that on occasion I have kept a dream diary, but I haven't been persistent with it. And so I would be interested in knowing kind of the mechanics of how you do that, you know, just like you personally, or if you know of other ways of doing it. I think that would be very interesting. So that's one. The other is, for myself, I have certain dreams that recur that I term stress dreams. And, you know, they're dreams that, you know, something bad is happening in them. And, but they're similar. I had the same dream, you know, throughout my life. And so I know when I have those dreams that I need to kind of pay attention to what's going on in my life, because obviously I'm, you know, something is just stressing me. And so I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit. And then thirdly, the other thing that really broke into my mind almost immediately when you were talking about the traditions in the Jewish and Islamic faiths, was the Aborigines in Australia and their whole idea of the dreaming. And so any of those, and not to hijack the entire conversation, but that's just three things that jumped into my mind. Thank you.
Yes. Yes. If you want to, there's not a word I usually use, but let's say pre-modern civilizations, pre-scientific, pre-industrial civilizations like the native Australians and Native Americans see the workings of the unconscious in spiritual terms. So, and I have a dream catcher actually next to my bed from Australia. I don't know if that helps, but I like the symbolism. So that's the last, Kelly. I'll get to the stress dream, the recurring dream in a moment. And you asked about the mechanics of actually recording one's dreams. This works differently for different people, but I find it's good to have a pad of paper and a writing implement next to your bed. If you prefer to type, I guess you could have some device, a tablet or something. If you don't want to write, I write my dreams out in longhand in a book, a loose leaf binder. Um, if you really want to get into the discipline, and it is a discipline and it gets easier over time, and don't worry if for even days at a time you don't remember a dream, just have that intentionality when you go to sleep. The key thing is when you wake up, don't jump out of bed. Lie in bed for an extra 15 minutes. And if you want to be interrupted in a dream so it's really vivid and memorable, you can set your alarm 15 minutes before you really need to get up. That'll ensure that you'll be awakened in the last dreaming stage of your night. We generally dream 3 up to 4 times a night, accompanied by rapid eye movement. That's how you can tell from the outside, REM sleep. And often the first one is a short, and each one gets longer until you kind of have an epic feature film in your unconscious mind that weaves together elements of the previous 2 or 3 shorter segments. So if you set your alarm, then you'll wake up in the middle of that last dreaming phase. And if you're like me, you shower in the morning rather than at night. You can shower in the semi-darkness so that the water flows over you, and that helps your unconscious reveal itself. Now, here's another interesting phenomenon that I have found. If you have only a thread of the last dream and you start to write it down and your memory is activated and you keep writing and you finish writing out or typing out everything you remember from the last dream, the dream just before can then pop up and take its place. And if you write that out, maybe the dream just before that can take its place. There's some kind of hydraulic mechanism of the last one pushing down the earlier ones. Not often, but that sometimes is the case. So, and you can decide if you want to, if you're living with somebody, or you can pick up the phone and talk to somebody who's not with you, especially in COVID times. You can share your dream and exchange dreams and be interpreters, respondents to each other, and that might flesh, especially somebody who knows you well and is non-judgmental. And you can share your wisdom and maybe reinforce each other in this spiritual practice. Now, the last thing, Kelly, about your recurring dream, offline we can talk about the contents, and maybe I can offer you some specific feedback. But what I've found is, first of all, I have dreams of recurring stressful times, like showing up late to a class I'm supposed to teach or a meeting I'm supposed to attend. So in waking life, I have time issues, time management challenges. So my dreams are reflecting that. But there are cases where we feel pursued by some threatening presence, a monster. And I don't know what the stress produces in you. But if you feel under threat, you might step back and you might try to tell your unconscious even before you go to sleep, let's dialogue with the threatening presence and see if it has a message to share with me. Maybe it wants to teach me something. Maybe it's a friendly advisor, coach, counsel. Maybe I'm just projecting onto it some fear that is unfounded. So there are cases of people who while awake and maybe in a guided fantasy with some friend or some therapeutic counselor, can go into the dream while awake, but in a kind of semi-conscious state, and dialogue with the perceived threat. So I don't know if any of that is helpful. Great. Thanks for those questions. Anyone else want to raise a question or a comment? Especially if you are dream recorders too. Share your experience.
My name's Carl, and I'm wondering, in the traditions you've studied, what is, not the emphasis, but how much is put toward the possibility of a dark power rather than a light power inspiring a dream, and what are the tips for discernment on which is which?
That is an excellent question, Carl. There are references to dark or even satanic powers that might use us in unguarded moments, including when we're asleep. So it's helpful to develop your own tools of discernment, and there having a community of companions or even one or two might be helpful. There are instances in the Jewish tradition, there is a prayer that was formulated thousands of years ago for when you have a bad dream, that you pray to God to annul it or transform it for good. So I'm not going to say that all dreams are full of light. Now, the question is, if we have dark forces within us, which I believe we do, and they also come to reveal themselves in our dream life, especially if we suppress them or deny them while we're awake, it could be that we have to find some ways to integrate those in our own self-understanding so that we don't become split personalities like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then end up projecting onto other people all the darkness, all the evil, and we think of ourselves as children of light and they are children of darkness. So there's a psychological angle to the question that you raised, Carl, in terms of us as, shall we say, spackled beings, mixtures of light and darkness. And then if you want to become theological, ontological, cosmological, and we talk about demonic forces outside ourselves and what impact do they have on our world, on this plane of reality. And if there are angels of light and angels of darkness, let's use angels in that generic sense, beings, celestial beings, which are usually non-material, but sometimes they show up. They do manifest themselves in human form on occasion, and the Bible is full of those. And I know of cases where people, including the late Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, would report on her guardian angels showing up. Well, maybe there are pursuers going after those guardian angels. This is above my pay grade, and I don't know how the divine has structured the universe on that level. Who's along with the angels to manipulate or try to control events down here, and whether our unconsciouses might be susceptible to such influence. I leave that as an open question. I don't know where you are coming from, Carl. If you want to refine the question, ask it from a different angle, or be more specific. I'm very much open to it. Where are you coming from in raising the question?
Well, no, I think that discernment is the key, and I very much agree that we can receive that spark, that impetus from either angels of light or angels of darkness, and an angel of darkness can and does disguise itself as an angel of light. But I have not felt a specific perceived inability to tell the difference, but yet I see that as absolutely critical. And I'm not aware of Christian, Jewish, or Muslim teachings in this is the litmus test. And if it's this, then avoid it. Consider it more. If it's this, this is the watermark of an angel of light. Follow this and not that. There may be none. I don't know of any, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Well, okay. If I were to have a really vivid, powerful dream, and it might indicate some unsavory force trying to influence me, I would get some pastoral counseling. I would not keep that to myself. I would share that with someone. My own therapist, counselor, is a Jungian whom I chose specifically because of his Jungian orientation, and I do share dreams with him. I don't think I've ever had the kind of dream you're now describing. So either I'm just fortunate, blessed to have either goofy, nonsensical, or occasionally important wake-up calls and correctives. One that I've had on a few occasions is either my library falls on me. I see a whole stack of books behind you. A bookshelf falls down on me, or I'm lugging sacks of books from one place to another, and it keeps reminding me, divest, Yehezkel. You have too many books, and the ones you've read, okay, give somebody else a chance. The ones you haven't read, really cull your library to the point where in the years you have left, maximally choose the books that you want to read for the rest of your life, and the others donate to a library. So I've already donated, close to 20 boxes of books to the Hartford Seminary Library, realizing, okay, I'm never going to get to these, and I read them and I don't need to read them again. And I'm trying to get down to my working library, the ones that I use to teach, or the ones, especially novels, that I have always put aside. Yeah, when I have time. Yes, I have ambivalence toward the idea of retirement, whatever that means, or stopping to work. So now I teach part-time online, and I enjoy that, and I have more reading time, and it's great. It's great. Here's the book I'm reading right now, which I highly recommend. It's written by a friend of mine who's a spiritual director as well as a gardener, and gardening and writing her spiritual practice is called Sacred Soil, A Gardener's Book of Reflections by Melina Rudman, who lives here in Connecticut, and in fact is going to join a class of mine from Merrimack College on Tuesday evening, where we're going to talk about the connection between nature and spirituality. Mm-hmm. Anyway, that was a little digression, but my dreams are a corrective because I'm such a bibliophile and I don't like to read books online through Kindle or something. Mm-hmm. But okay, my unconscious can be my best friend if I can trust it.
That's the point of the question.
Well, thank you for your question, Carl. Anyone else?
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
I just have something to chime in along with that, and then maybe quickly shift to a reflection / question.
Great. Tell me what your name is first.
Oh, sure. My name's Amy, and my husband's Miguel.
Amy,
and yeah, sure. I had some reflections a little on the dream prophecy connection that might help Carl and or us. That in one of the passages in the book of Revelation, it talks about the spirit of prophecy, or the spirit, let me look it up real quick, if it's helpful. Here it is. For this testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. And so and then there's another passage that says, don't despise prophecy, don't quench the spirit, but be open to it, but test what's good. And so I think if that's of encouragement, one could say Jesus or Muhammad or whomever, in terms of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Like, does it feel like have some semblance of the hesed of God, of the belovedness, of the nature of God? If that can help, I know for me, if I check it or sound it, it helps to have a sense of, oh, this doesn't ring much like what I know of the life and love of Jesus. Like, that helps me when I think about prophecy or dreams. I don't know how that sounds to you.
Yeah, that's a pretty good discernment filter.
And then next up is sleep. In our culture, you mentioned a moment ago, sleep and creating spaciousness for our own thoughts. You said that the challenge would be to extend this to those Palestinians or whomever who are also, or anyone living in exile, indignity, and despair. And I feel like sometimes with our 24-hour news, are like gluing us to our phones. I almost feel during our waking hours, we don't give ourselves a lot of spaciousness sometimes. I feel like we're exiled from our own thoughts, our own connected self. We're not at home with ourselves. And then we stay glued to the phone. And I think sometimes we don't even give ourselves enough time for sleep. So getting into REM sleep, if you're just go, 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 you got the blue light. I just think some of it is almost like, oh, before we think about dreams, do we need to reorient ourselves to even creating a spaciousness for the divine, you know? How does that sound to you? I'm painting it out with broad strokes.
I resonate totally,
Yeah.
Amy, with what you are saying. And you know what I call these things? Weapons of mass distraction.
Oh, I love it.
These things are ruling our lives. Well, this is one of the reasons we have a discipline called Sabbath, where we, in our modern, technologically driven times, it means unplugging from all of these devices for 25 hours from Sunday sundown until an hour after sundown on Saturday night. Friday, did I say Friday? Or did I say Sunday? Friday. Friday sundown, 18 minutes before sundown until about an hour after sundown. On Saturday, when you could see 3 stars in the sky, that's the time of Shabbat. So, and just to go inward and introspect more, and yes, Sabbath sleep in Yiddish, Shabbos Shluf, is the most nourishing sleep of the week. That's on a Saturday afternoon. So have a nap. Yeah.
Thanks.
Can you imagine that? Sleeping in the afternoon? God, who does that? But there are siesta cultures, you know. Spaciousness, I like that. I like that term. Just giving ourselves the time and the space to get off the treadmill and relax, and then connect, you know, get in touch with that spiritual umbilical cord that connects us to the divine. So yes, thanks, Amy. That's very helpful and wise.
Okay. Well, thanks for helping to stimulate that thought. It was all percolating.
Yeah. It probably helps to have some contemplative practice while you're awake. Carve out that time. And dialoguing with your dreams is one interpretive, contemplative practice. You know, instead of Lectio Divino, picking up scriptures, you pick up your dream journal and start reading something, and maybe something from a month ago or even a year ago or 5 years ago. Oh, that makes sense now. Retrospectively, I didn't even see that a month or a year ago, but now I can see it as part of a pattern. So you keep reading your dreams. I'm not going to glorify it to the point of saying it's a sacred text, but you wrote it. Your unconscious wrote these segments that add up to a whole slew of messages. You know, and I've been keeping a dream journal since February of 1974. So I got a lot of material there. And they've helped me. You know, I've gone through various metamorphoses, and they've all been nourished and sometimes prodded by my dreams. Yes. Moving to Israel, I lived in Jerusalem from 78 to 2002, coming back to the United States. These major life transitions have been reinforced by my dream life. So ultimately the challenge is coherence. How do you weave together your unconscious and your wakefulness? How do you stay mindful on all the levels of your God-given capacity for knowing? We know in different ways. the real tragedy is our school systems encourage very narrow ways of knowing and expressing ourselves. And here, I'm not going to talk about Duke University or any particular academic institution, but having 1 foot solidly in academia, sometimes 1.5 to 2 feet in academia for parts of my life, I've always recognized the incompleteness of what knowledge means in academic settings. And the split, the bifurcation between, let's say, academia and the church or the synagogue or the mosque or a yeshiva or a Sunday school or madrasa, whatever, 2 different kinds of school systems, one aiming at knowledge and one aiming at wisdom. And I think we sacrifice wisdom to accumulate more knowledge, and I happen to think our whole culture is warped as a result. Oh, Sam Wells made the same. Thank you, Miguel. Oh, that's you, one of you.
Amy, we explored a bit connecting with ourselves or our unconscious selves, trying to discern when we're connecting with the divine. I wander a bit toward connecting with the other, the reconciling with those we've been separated from. I guess one thread that I've noticed a few times recently when experts in the field were talking about how different groups need to try to understand each other. They said we need to form a foundation of a common story that we believe in, that, back to our devices, that we're current media sources. We are at high risk of being siloed into only hearing from people who think like us, and then of course our thinking gets warped to go even further down a path, not as much of a shared reality. I guess one reaction that I've gradually become aware of, maybe some of the first times we heard the word story, it was, a little kid telling a lie to get out of trouble, or it's a work of fiction. And in this context, we're wanting something that's true. Maybe you round off some of the painful edges to let people from other ends of the spectrum feel comfortable. And so I'm wondering, how can we, construct a narrative that is comfortable for others to hear, that leads us to realize, hey, we do have the same goals. We're not enemies of each other.
Well, thank you, Nelson. Let me do my best in responding to what I sense is an appeal for common ground, sacred common ground, how to find it. I believe it's there, and we work against it, partly for ego gratification, to prove that we are right and somebody else is wrong, that we get stuck into that either or mentality rather than both and. I don't know. It's an open question for me whether we as a species or even two peoples as a couple can find a common narrative. It might be possible. I'm not sure that it might be the end result. I'm not sure that's the immediate goal we should set for ourselves. Maybe we should clarify what the disparate narratives are and then put them together like a mosaic and try to look at the bigger pattern and say, okay, let's say, I'm just throwing this out, I'm talking out loud. Let's say, if you want to talk about the left and the right or the blue and the red in the United States at the moment, let's say we have because we have different communication silos based on the media information we take in. And we stay in our ideological bubbles and only share information that reinforces what we already know or think we know. It might be possible if first of all, we bracketed our ideological views for a while, and we try to understand each other as individuals. And let's say we have dream material as one resource to share. We might discover, oh, we have shared fears of the world becoming totally chaotic, out of control, and really dangerous, life-threatening for whatever reason. The perceived threats might be different, but we're all suffering deep fear and anxiety, apprehension about the future. And maybe we have different aspirations for where we want our children or grandchildren to be, happy, healthy, prosperous, whatever, not fearing, living in a world that is safe and secure, and not on the brink of destruction, either through our weaponry or Mother Nature. Then we might say, oh, we have this common ground to build on. Let's see how we can form an inclusive agenda that doesn't make one side win and the other side lose, or one side right and the other side wrong. But I think you need pastoral leadership to midwife that. Right now, we are in the hands of, what can I say? Many party leaders who don't have that pastoral gift. And I'm hoping that the president-elect and the vice president-elect have the pastoral skills, gifts, capacities, which I sense they do. I hope they will be honored for that and not fought. They will be, that itself will be perceived as a threat to those with, let's say, more partisan and ruthless agendas. I don't know, Nelson, whether that's a helpful response. Yeah, okay. Yeah, since we all dream, whether we remember our dreams or not, that's just a built-in given. We all dream. And that's something we generally don't share. We keep those messages private. But if we're believers and we believe, because our traditions teach us, that our dreams can be some medium for higher wisdom, then maybe if we share that higher wisdom, we can get out of the holes we have dug for ourselves into, Let's see, I'm looking in the chat. Kelly, can I suggest any readings? Yes. There's a Washington Post article about faith groups helping the current situation. That's good. Maybe you can send us a link, Kelly, or at least the title so we can Google it. There are all kinds of resources. Where would I start? Well, I tell you, I can send you, Nelson, and you can email it. You have an email list, I assume, for everybody gathered here. Is that so? There's a way to communicate with everybody?
Pretty much. And I guess if there are a few people with us this morning that I don't know an email address, you could, I'll put in chat my email address, and anybody who wants something in writing that Dr. Landau sends to me, I can then share with you.
Okay, I can send you a more detailed, if you're really interested in this subject, a more detailed published essay on dreams and dream interpretation in Islam and in Judaism, and it has resources listed there. So you can look them up if you're interested. Morton Kelsey, K-E-L-S-E-Y, is the Christian writer I'm most familiar with, who's written on dreams within a Christian theological framework. He's got several books on that. So if you start with him from a Christian perspective, Morton Kelsey, K-E-L-S-E-Y, that would help. And from what I'll share with you through Nelson, I can give you some Jewish and Islamic sources. There's Nelson's email in the chat.
Would you like to share with us some of your insights from work you've done in the Middle East? I guess for decades, whenever I've been, somewhat sarcastically talking about, here's a really hard problem, and once we solve it, then we'll become Balkan peace negotiators, or we'll solve the peace issue in the Middle East. And you've actually done concrete work in that area.
Okay, well, tying it to the theme of this morning, I would say Zionism writ large, the homecoming project of the Jewish people to the ancestral homeland, is kind of the fulfillment of ancient prophecies and dreams. It's a Leighton McCutcheon, my teacher back in the 70s, would say basically, myths are cultural dreams and dreams are personal myths. Okay, that's how the imagination works in the personal and the transpersonal spheres. So Zionism is kind of a cultural dream of return, and after the Holocaust, national rehabilitation, healing for the Jews. Okay, well, it came up against an indigenous Palestinian population that was in the land as a majority for centuries, and they had their own dream, their own aspiration to be an independent nation. And those two nationalistic aspirations, okay, they became ideologies as well, but I think they were rooted in authentic spiritual intentions. That's the light part, but then a lot of darkness got mixed into both of them, which has caused a lot of death and suffering. But if we could really tease out underneath the ideologies, the holy sparks of light in those two national myths of redemption, of national redemption, and make them come together as interdependent rather than separate and competing, then I think we have a spiritual foundation for some political process. Right now, it's all secular, utilitarian balancing and exchange of interests. That's why I never use the term conflict resolution. I use the term conflict transformation. Who says we want even to resolve conflicts or that they can even be resolved? Conflicts can be creative stimuli for all kinds of good things, creative things, constructive things. But if they don't get hijacked by people with their own, nefarious intentions and agendas of destruction and self-aggrandizement. So we have to bring some humility to the whole process. So that's on a macro level, Nelson. I'll send you something else which you can send around, which is just a 2-page reflection called A Holistic Process for Peacemaking, which talks about how the political utilitarian level is only one level, and underneath we have to transform our cognitive, emotional, and spiritual investments in who we are, who the so-called enemy is, how our relationship is somehow irreconcilable. But I think between Israelis and Palestinians, it's definitely not irreconcilable. It's not like, Nazis and humane people. There's nothing in common there, except maybe underneath all the darkness, there's still some light to be salvaged and surfaced. The question is how to do that. There are Nazis who have reformed themselves, transformed themselves. There are white supremacists who have come to realize that their worldviews are wrong and disastrous. There are cases like that of awareness and repentance. So anyway, I'm not optimistic, but I'm eternally hopeful. I make that distinction. Even when I'm pessimistic, I stay hopeful. And my work in the Middle East has taught me that. I'm an incrementalist, so I have appreciated the blessings in every small advance forward toward mutual accommodation between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And both peoples are stuck in competing victim scripts that they need help from the outside of people who will be loving critics. Let's say champions of the light and corrections for the darkness. It looks like Amy is gearing up to say something.
Okay. Well, it's interesting. From a therapist lens, I don't do couples therapy. I do more of individual, but I've been trained some in Gottman. You might be familiar with Gottman marital counseling, and his premise, he and his wife, they're both therapists, are that you're always going to have 3 to 4 perpetual problems. If I'm with Miguel, we'll have our 3 to 4. That just is, but if I'm with Bill and he's with, then you'll inherit your unique perpetual problems. So he looks at more, what is the difference between disaster couples and master? It's often how you, when you enter into the moments of connection, frankly, around the perpetual problem, when that conflict is rearing up, looking at the dream within the conflict. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's kind of interesting language. Not only just what you've shared, some creating space for dream and dream interpretation, but then in our interpersonal way of relating, can we be still enough to listen? Well, have a moment of contact and then listen to what is the dream. And so I think that just maybe flows into what you're sharing here. You're not going to resolve these, or you're going to always have some of these perpetual problems, which actually can enliven us if we approach them in ways of compassion, courage, and connection. Just, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, have you written that? Have you written about that?
Yeah, so I have I what? I didn't hear you.
Have you written about what you just said?
No.
Oh, well, I encourage you to do that, especially with your alliterative gifts.
Maybe we could talk about that. I don't always have the courage to know how to hone it.
To yourself.
I write to myself in my journal
Yeah.
a lot.
That's good. Great. Well, maybe Miguel will help you externalize it, share it with the greater public. What was I got courage and connection. What was the courage, something in connection? What was the third C?
Probably compassion.
Compassion, I think. That's great. Yeah, we need more of all those. Starting with connection. Yeah. Gosh, and now in this pandemic, we're less connected than ever. And look at how we're connected this morning. This is at least, thank God for Zoom, right? Some people say we're exiled in Zoom space now. Well, it could be worse. What if we didn't have this? Then I think our mental health would be even more in serious danger. Well, I'm conscious of the time. It's up to you when you want to break before your 11 o'clock worksheet.
When we met in person, I always went by people voted with their feet. There were some people who wanted to get to the chapel to be in their favorite spot for the best acoustics and hear the entirety of the organ prelude. And then to be other people that would linger in class until 10 minutes after the worship service had begun. So we're not clock maniacs around here.
Okay. I'm not pressed by any other obligation. I see several of you. Raylene was on, had her video on before, but now she's not there. And there are a few of you that have never shown your face, which is okay. Oh, and there's Michael. Hi, Michael. Nice to see you. Gives me a sense of who is present in this virtual room.
And I guess for a little bit of context, yesterday morning, some of us were among, I guess it was 40 to 50 people who had an online session for 3 hours on a retreat about seeking a beginning remedy for racism. And we had, I'm not sure I captured all the geographic spread, but pastors from New York and far beyond Durham who tuned in for that, as well as some of our congregation members. So mixing these two, yesterday and today together, we should be better prepared for seeking the goodness within ourselves and better light in the world.
Indeed. You know, when I think of, okay, if we dive down into, without overgeneralizing, but let's say, for the sake of this discussion, the dreams of Black folks and the dreams of white folks in the United States of America, okay? Not to leave out Latinx or Native Americans or Asian Americans, but let's, for the moment, we all have dreams of freedom and dignity. The people on the Mayflower and all the other white Europeans who came and, you know, took the land from the Native Americans, and a good number of them enslaved Africans. That's the dark side of a dream of self-determination, self-actualization in a new land, a new Jerusalem, city on a hill, all of these dream images, okay, motivating white people, Caucasian Europeans towards some kind of manifest destiny, they even called it. Okay, this is all dream talk. Of course, Africans brought here in chains, if they survived the Middle Passage, had a dream of freedom and dignity. That's a pretty minimalist human aspiration, but if you're enslaved, okay. And that's a common dream, to be free and fulfilled. So the question is, how can we share that human aspiration and that dream of redemption in a way that doesn't make one side gain at the other's expense? And it obviously requires at this point deep acknowledgement, remorse, and repentance on the part of white people toward people who are of other skin pigmentations. But if somehow we could tap in to the wisdom in the dreams and the songs, the spiritual wisdom of Black people, African Americans, I think that is just a great gift to whites. And it to me, that testimony of resilience and of faith, that's one of the deepest expressions of faith in human history. It remains, you know. Barack Obama even wrote a book called Dreams of My Father. So there's a lot to work with here. The question is, how do we tap this politically? Who are the leaders? It could be religious leaders who talk this language, and it's biblical and Quranic. So, you know, people could preach, teach, using this symbolic language to connect, to go deeper than this mindset, which is based on fear and grievance. All these resentful people, all these angry, resentful people in our midst, we have to take their grievance seriously and go underneath. And this is where all this unconscious material can help. Underneath grievance is usually a deep reservoir of grief. Grief hardens into grievance if it's not worked through in a therapeutically helpful way, in a positive way. Michael.
Yes, I wanted to say that I do agree. You mentioned a number of things in your talk. One of them is that we need some pastoral leadership, and you said you hope that the Biden administration might provide that. I think that the church is in a very, very unique position where our language, our mode of worship, the things we think about, actually gives us the pastoral tools, if you like, to foster better understanding of each other's dreams and each other's where we are all coming from, essentially, even in the racial conversation. And the fact that from all you've said, there's so much that actually unites, that could unite than divides, but someone has to articulate it. And I think that the church is in a very, as Christians, are in a very, very strong position to be able to do that if we will take up that challenge. And I personally, I think that it's I hear a lot of talk about white and black. I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. It's not, anyway, in 2 weeks' time, I'll be talking about this topic again, and I'll be leading the adult forum. So I wanted to just mention that this is something I really want to explore from the pastoral side, and from how, as Christians and as a church, we can actually be in the forefront. Desmond Tutu and the Christians in South Africa demonstrated this. Even the freedom fighters could say, we went to Christian mission boarding schools, and the values we were taught helps us to bring about reconciliation. So even if they were not taught the values explicitly, but it was part of the whole culture of their training, they were willing to forgive, and to work with white people and to create a new nation based on Christian values. So I really want us to explore the whole racism question from a completely different angle, and hopefully you'll all join me in 2 weeks to go through this.
Thank you, Michael. I will try to log in and connect. I'm very interested in what you're going to share then. And I, having examined extensively, really, the Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa and in other places, I think that both Israel and Palestine and the United States need a Truth and Reconciliation process to be shepherded by the counterparts to Archbishop Tutu. In Israel and Palestine, it would have to be Jews and Christians and Muslims. And here in the United States, yes, we have people like Reverend Barber and presiding Bishop Michael Curry in the Episcopal Church, and others who can help us. So, yeah, without that, I don't know what kind of future we have on this continent, or in the Middle East for that matter. So I'm glad you're going to be doing that. 2 weeks from today, same time?
Yes, 29th, same time.
The 29th. Okay, I'm going to make a note of that. Thank you, Michael, for letting
I must say, this has been a very difficult talk to prepare for. I tried to duck it, but Carol won't let me. So, so I'm going to do my best to share, but I really want to have a good conversation for everybody to come in, and let's participate in this.
Great.
I guess we should enable those of you who'd like to go to another online meeting to have that opportunity. Let's, as is our habit, unmute our mic and see who's clapping loudest at each instant. That's Dr. Landau.
Okay, ready?
Thanks. I would really like to know all of your personal stories in greater detail, but maybe we'll do that sometime.
Thank you.
Thank you for welcoming me into your company.
Thank you so much. It was a wonderful discussion. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find the reference to the article I mentioned. I'll keep looking. I just can't find it.
If you email that to me when you do find it in a day or two, when I've received things from Dr. Landau, I'll include that.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a blessed Sunday. Take care.
Yeah.